Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's looking at the clock, and I don't think we have much more time in this session. And I know that most of the aspects of this bill have been well traversed by people. So, standing, I do actually want to make a couple of comments. I do know that there was, I think, one objection, couple of objections to the passage of this bill. And I guess without naming people, I would try and speak a little bit to some of those concerns. I've got to compliment the Parliamentary Library too, Mr. Speaker, for the work they've done in the background with these wonderful debate packs and the Bill's Digests and everything, which gives anyone who really wants to understand what's happened with this bill and the passage of this bill, how it made it here, the background behind the Wellington City Council's decision to have MP Grant Robertson bring this bill to the House. I just recommend people who wish to know a little bit more into that space and have a quiet read. I do find, Mr. Speaker, and I think I said it earlier, that there's a similarity between this bill and the way in which Wellingtonians feel about their green belt to that which I experienced when I first went down to Christchurch back in the 70s, and when I was there in the 1990s at a time when I actually stood for Labour as a Member of Parliament against Ruth Richardson. He stood against Ruth Richardson in 1993. One of the issues, Mr. Speaker, we had a ball down there, Mr. Mueller. We ran Ruth Richardson hot to the wire. Almost lost her seat, didn't she? Did lose her appointment, but digress. And then she resigned, spat the dummy, and we had a by-election. But
it's back to the bill.
Back to the bill. At that time, there was a very strong voice in Canterbury, within Christchurch in particular, for the preservation of the green belt that existed around Christchurch. And it's interesting when I read some of the commentary, and particularly the words of Helen Ritchie, as she was quoted in this document, where she described the green belt of Wellington as being the lungs of our city. It fosters growth, health, public recreation, and the natural heritage in the coolest little capital in the world. And those words are very, very similar to the words that were, to the thoughts and the views that were expressed by Cantabrians when they fought, unsuccessfully as it turned out, to retain the green belt in Christchurch. And we saw a lot of things happen down in Christchurch as a result of that breakdown of their green belt, that people in this bill, that people in submissions, said that they did not want to see here in Wellington. Whether or not they were in tune with what had happened down in Christchurch, I have no knowledge, but what is clear is that their thinking, their thoughts, their aspirations and hopes were very much the same. There are people who have objected to this bill and have made their objections very clear. I guess from the New Zealand First perspective, one clause, one amendment that we take that we are very pleased about, and it's been mentioned here this evening on numerous occasions by various speakers, is that the Local Government and Environment Committee recommended changes to the bill to clarify that the Public Works Act 1981 applies to this town belt. A recommended new clause would mean that the council could not sell the town belt land for public works and would not change the powers under the Public Works Act. And this is agreed by the Wellington City Council. I actually deliberately read that out for the benefit of government members who might think that we're stupid, might think that we in the opposition benches are dumb. I'm not saying because the government members on the Local Government Committee didn't agree, they did. But I'm actually referring to recent changes that this government has rammed through the House and recent things that they have done. And when you look at this bill and you look at the concerns raised by people who still email me, I've got an email sitting right beside me from a person who's saying, this bill does not protect the town belt. This bill does not prevent the Crown coming in and taking the town belt or pieces of it under the Public Works Act. Well, what it does do is it stops the City Council. And what it does do is send a clear indication from Parliament that that should not be allowed to happen. And I don't need to discuss some things that this government's done recently, because we'll talk about that more in another forum at another time when we expose that to the public of New Zealand. But the changes to the Public Works Act, the changes to the legislation have cemented in, and we believe, taken care of some of those concerns held by those few people who did object to this bill going through. The things that we also take satisfaction, so we take satisfaction out of the fact that the bill does give greater protection to the integrity of the Wellington town belt. It does give a clear and legal definition of the extent of the town belt, something that never existed before. It does modernise the legislation, which, dated back in 1871. A lot of things have happened since then. I mean, well, Paul Foster Bell was born, for one. And so was that gentleman over there. And a lot of that legislation, a lot of the deed had become contentious in the fact that it was difficult to interpret and therefore able to be misinterpreted, therefore able to be misapplied. So this bill tidies the legal definition up. This bill brings modern legislation to play, makes it possible to administer the town belt, protect it, enhance it, grow it within the context of modern law. It gives clear expression of the entitlement of the inhabitants to freedom of entry and access to the town belt, unequivocal. There are significant restrictions and controls on new buildings, but it recognises that there are roads and infrastructural assets running through what was the green belt, and therefore that these provisions should not apply to those. Otherwise, how would you ever maintain those roads? How would you ever be able to dig up those parts that actually have infrastructure buried within them? And it takes care of those issues that might arise from modern technology and the need to be able to move power lines and such across. It gives greater powers to the inhabitants to have standing to object to any compulsory acquisition of land by the Crown were that ever to be again proposed, and we've already heard from speakers how that was proposed by the government, who wanted to slap a motorway through and expand their roads of national significance. Mr. Speaker, to conclude, New Zealand First is very happy to support this bill. We congratulate Grant Robertson for bringing this bill to the House. We thank the committee for its diligence and thank Scott Simpson and the members of his team for working with everybody. And I think the Local Government Law and Order the Local Government Environment Select Committee should once again take a pat on the back for being able to work in a very collegial manner towards achieving something very worthwhile and something that the inhabitants and the governors of the Wellington City will be very pleased to see when it is finally passed through in its third reading. Thank you very much.
Call Brett Hudson.
Thank you, Mr.